My man Wayne is here. You might know him as Osiris. You might have seen him on Tim Cass back in the days. You might also see him on Twitter as Middle MAGA. However, I don't think he's so much with the MAGA movement anymore, but we're going to bring him in here today. Bring him on in. My friend Wayne is here to talk with us. What's up, big dog?
What's good? I'm still gonna rock with MAGA. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna kind of separate. There's an Israel first MAGA, and then there's an America first MAGA. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
You're right. I mean, that's a question we're going to ask today. And you're welcome, man. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm glad you can come here with me today. Um, like I said, disclaimer, if I had to vote for either one of the two, you put a gun to my head, I would vote for Donald Trump over Joe Biden. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have a buyer beware sticker on it and kind of act like we're going to get real systemic change. We are not. They're a lot alike when it comes to policy, when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to domestic policy, and I'd like to dive into those differences. So my first question to you, my friend, and Jamie, make sure we're getting up plenty of banners over there because we have a lot of stuff in the doc, and I want to make sure that people ask these questions. And thank you for the super chats coming in, guys. Right off the bat, man, it's so awesome to get super chats again. I was demonetized for 4 years on the convo couch.
Jeez.
Go ahead, buddy.
With all the hard work that you and Fiorella have done, I was so mad when I saw that. Demonetized and really deranked, deboosted. But great to see you. This is a great branding. I just love this. Pasta to go. This is dope.
Well, thank you. I say I want to make the show a little bit like Tucker Carlson meets Anthony Bourdain meets Bobby Bacala from The Sopranos, all in one. Because when I go out to see these elections and observe these elections, I'm going to show people the food and the culture like Anthony Bourdain did. I'm going to try to do some monologues. I haven't got my teleprompter yet, but I honestly want to do some monologues because I have these thoughts, and when I write them down, I'd like to present them as a monologue. I don't want to wag my finger at anybody, but I would like to present a point of view that really helps bring people together. And I really think, I remember the last time we did a show together, we were talking about the border and the wall, and I would say, hey, man, you can close the border. I don't think it's going to work, but you can only close the border if you close the bases. In other words, I was always referring to our foreign policy as the number one driving force for migration to the southern border. I talked about MSNBC and CNN and how they won't stay away from Donald Trump's cases. But man, Osiris, you want to talk about Fox News and Newsmax getting stuck on the border. Listen, you want to argue it's a problem? Fine, we can argue about it. But they're acting like it's the most important thing on the face of the earth, where I got the border way down below, and we're not even really having a serious talk about fixing the border by fixing our foreign policy. Go ahead, Osiris.
Yeah, it is. And I'm guilty of it too. I mean, the border problem is a symptom of the larger problem. And that last discussion we had is where I really became totally anti-war after that discussion that we had. Because before that, I was like, you know what? If China invades Taiwan, there might be an argument there. After that discussion, no. Either I'm anti-war or I'm not. And that plays a role in the border. No one is talking about, well, why do we have all these bases all over the world? Why are we forcing all this economic instability all over the world? And then they're coming in here. Let's talk about the real problem. There are some people who have gone down there. Laura Loomer's done a little bit. Ben Berquam's done a little bit, but definitely not on Fox News.
Yeah, yeah. Man, I met Laura Loomer at a election integrity event. She really knows about elections, but I have some serious disagreements with her when it comes to Israel Palestine. But she's not here to defend herself, so I'm not going to go at her. I know her and my business partner Fiorella Isabel have been kind of jostling online. I'll let them have a friendly battle about it. But not because she's my partner, but I really strongly agree with Fiorella. And it's something you said too as well in the beginning of the show. And I always pose the question: how can we really be America first if we're going to be Israel first? It's a very important question to ask. And we're going to stay away from the border because we already had that conversation. But I got some questions to bounce off you, and I'd love to hear your answers. So you ready to get rolling, my friend?
Let's go. Let's do it. Yes.
All right. So the first question is on today's show, and we're going to have Garland Nixon and Wilmer Leon coming on. You can see Osiris is there as well. But the first question, let's start with Iran. Okay. Is there really any difference? Here is Trump gloating about killing Qasem Soleimani. Trump is doing the bidding of Israel, because that's what this is about. And I ask patriots, how can you be America first if you are Israel first? Take a listen to what Donald Trump has to say about this.
Think of it. I got rid of ISIS 100%, got rid of the greatest terrorists in the world, Soleimani and al-Baghdadi, the greatest terrorists in the world. And we brought back our troops. We were pulling out of Afghanistan, but we were pulling out with dignity and strength, and we were going to be out. You know, they were there for 20 years. And the leader of the Taliban in Afghanistan, very tough guy, Abdul, I had a conversation because he was killing a lot of our people with sniper fire during the Obama administration, really a lot. They were just shooting them out. And I had to talk. The press went crazy. They said, what are you talking to them for? Why would you be talking to the Taliban? I said, because that's where the problem is. Remember Jesse James, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. It's the same thing. Why do you rob banks, Jesse? That's where the money is, you stupid fool. When I came into office.
So let's bring in Wayne over here. Wayne, first of all, I'd like to say that he's full of it. They did not get rid of ISIS. And let's be honest, when it comes to ISIS, Al-Qaeda, it was Soleimani with the Iranians that did a lot of more of the heavy lifting when it came to getting rid of ISIS, or at least running them off and running them out of Syria. But the United States for quite some time has been funding ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and they're still doing it to this day in Syria. And the thing he also mentioned too as well is that, and this is listen, I know we have a lot of low-informed voters out there, a lot of voters who think a Shia is the same as a Sunni, won't know the difference between these jihadist groups, but he's also bragging about killing Soleimani and doing the bidding of Israel. Is that any different to the foreign policy we have today with Joe Biden?
No, there's no fundamental difference. And it, like you said, it all comes down to Israel. And I would like to say Donald Trump did not start any new wars. So I think that was a step in the right direction. But the problem here that I have is all of that popped off with Soleimani because of an American getting killed in Iraq. And that brings us back to, again, why do we have Americans in Iraq? I don't have any problem with them in the Middle East. They need to handle their beef over there. I have no reason to have beef with them. There's no reason for us to be over there. We're not making anything better. All we're doing is trying to move pieces around like we're playing Risk. And my whole life, I've been kind of blue-pilled, or you could say just an NPC, just walking around and not knowing what's going on. And you can't hide it anymore. We shouldn't be there. Pull them out. I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I think that's the real thing that we need to do is get out of there.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I do want to say this. You made a comment that he didn't start any wars. That is true. But guess what? He didn't end any. He didn't get the troops out of Afghanistan. We'll get to that eventually. And the military budget did increase every year as normal, as it did under Obama, as it did under George W. Bush. I really didn't see a stark difference when it comes to the military itself. Yes, he didn't take the bait in bombing Iran directly, but he did things like whack Soleimani, which was really kind of a little bit messed up because Soleimani was actually fighting ISIS in Syria. He used other militias. So, I mean, I don't see a lot of difference when it comes to Iran as far as Donald Trump is concerned and Joe Biden. And you pointed out some small differences, but can we agree to disagree that is not enough of a difference? Because even what you said there was so important. Let's start to really pull the troops out. He didn't pull the troops out of Syria. He says, we see the oil, we take the oil. Oh, yeah, by the way, China. And they're stealing oil in Syria and still inflaming the situation.
Now, let's be fair. Yes, I will agree there's no fundamental difference, but we're not going to have change overnight. If you want to go in the right direction, like you said, I think Trump is better, but no fundamental difference. But on Syria, to my knowledge, Trump wanted to pull troops out of Syria, and his own command, his own generals didn't listen to him. Is that correct?
I don't know exactly what happened, and it seems at the end of the day, the CIA gets the last word anyways.
Yeah.
We learned that from the Putin interview. But, I mean, he didn't campaign on it.
No,
he hasn't talked about it.
No.
He hasn't said, why do we have troops in Syria? We should not have troops in Syria. He hasn't said things like that. And when it came to Afghanistan, Rand Paul got a vote on the floor to defund the war in Afghanistan, and Donald Trump didn't mention a thing about it. And that is like I say, at the end of the day, he might talk a good game here and there, but the military industrial complex still gets their money. The military budget still goes up. He's just as much as a war hawk at times as any other president that's in office. I mean, the song remains the same, especially what he did in AFRICOM, where he started, loading up and arming those drones in AFRICOM after Biden opened up all these bases all along the continent. So that's just one thing to kind of talk about right there. It's up for the people at home to make that decision. If you think it's a stark enough difference, ladies and gentlemen, you say so. But for me, it's the old Led Zeppelin song. The song remains the same.
I agree. And the thing that makes them the same is Israel. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about this right now. Let's move on to NATO, Russia, and the Nord Stream pipeline, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Jamie, if you could take on down MAGA, middle MAGA, ultra MAGA. Wayne, take them down. Thank you so much. Let's move on to NATO and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. He is gloating about stopping Nord Stream 2. Biden did bomb it, but Donald Trump is gloating about it. And I wonder if Donald Trump was in office, if they would have done the same thing. Both Joe and Donald brag about sanctions they put on Russia. They both do it all the time. Any way you looked at it, sanctions is an act of war. How's that any difference? Let's listen to the man himself and then give me your opinion, Wayne.
Russia. I don't know anything about Russia other than I charged them for Nord Stream 2 and I stopped their pipeline, the biggest thing they ever had. And then they say, Trump loves Russia. Putin said to me, if you're really, they say that, I'd hate like hell to have you as an enemy if you're supposed to be a friend of mine, because I stopped the pipeline, Nord Stream 2, going to take care of Germany and all of Europe. I ended it. And then what happened? Joe Biden comes in and he approved it. He approved their pipeline, but he closed down the Keystone pipeline. How do you like that one? And then they say, Trump loves Russia. No, I was the worst thing in the sanctions I put on Russia. I was the worst thing that ever happened, but I did get along with Putin. That's a good thing. Getting along with these people is a good thing, not a bad thing. Like Russia.
Okay. So, Wayne, I put all these sanctions on Russia. Listen, sanctions are an act of war. And then he's very hypocritical when he starts talking, well, I got along with them. No, the other day, Putin said, I'd rather deal with Biden than Trump. I don't know why exactly he said that. I can't get into Putin's mind. But a lot of it seems to be that Biden's a little bit more predictable. Donald Trump, he might say one thing, and it's completely off the wall. And then he goes back and tells his country, like, we got to be strong. We got to achieve peace through strength. It makes no sense to me. He puts sanctions on Russia all the time. How is that any different? And how is he going to get any movement when Vladimir Putin sees plain and simple that the military-industrial complex is running things, the CIA is running foreign policy, not the president of the United States?
Yeah, if we want Trump to be different, we have to push him. We as the people. That's why I had a big problem with the MAGA movement. I don't hear or see a big push to talk about these things. These are where the fundamental issues in our country are coming from. This is why we don't have money for universal health care or all these other policies that might be good for our country. Whatever health care plan you want or anything you want to do, we don't have money because we're all putting it here. And what Trump did was the same old, we don't want Russia to have a good relationship with Europe. And I think there's other diplomatic ways. I've been looking at China. China doesn't do any of this kind of stuff. And they seem to have neutral relationships with all these countries. They don't really have beef with countries. You don't see people angry at China. And I think we need to change our approach to a non-militaristic approach. Trump is not fundamentally different here. No.
I really like that you pointed out, Wayne, that's your big issue with the movement, the MAGA movement, and I have the same issue. They capitulate to Donald Trump. They just start agreeing with him no matter what he says, rather than push him where he's wrong. The only area I saw people push him was on the vaccine, and he was a vaccine salesman. That's the only area, Wayne, where I saw them go, hey, man, let's they booed him, right? They booed the Johnson family when he was out at a rally. They should be, and they still boo Lindsey Graham. But when you start talking to people, well, Trump needs relationships inside the Senate, and Lindsey Graham ain't going nowhere, so he's got to be friends with Lindsey Graham. Like, no, he shouldn't. And also, too, as well, the mindset that when you talk about Trump's mindset is the same as maybe Biden's, where enemies with Europe, right? Like, let's push Russia away from Europe. Let's put that, kind of wedge in between there. It's awesome that you pointed it out. But how do we get the MAGA movement to hold Trump accountable when they simply capitulate to him? You'll know better than me.
Yeah, I think we have to first talk about it. Nobody is really talking about it. And I understand. I give this feedback to MAGA. I call them the populist right. I give them that feedback out of love. I think it is the best political movement. It's really cultural, actually. Cultural movement that's ever existed. And I think it should include you, Pasta. Believe it or not. I think it should include you, and many of my friends that I would call populist left should be in. We can rename it. I don't care. It's really a populist thing. Even Steve Bannon has said that. He's talked about it through Bernie Sanders. But we have to always remember these politicians work for us. And I know people are scared. There's a lot of craziness going on, but that can't change. Donald Trump does not control the movement.
I really wish I could help out, Wayne, but Donald Trump is making it really hard. You know how? He's always going, the radical left. I mean, I'm a leftist. Does that make me a radical? When I spoke at Defeat the Mandates in D.C. and in L.A., people introduced me as a common sense leftist. And that's cool. But Donald Trump kind of is just as divisive sometimes as the Republican by labeling us all radical leftists. We're not all radical leftists. I look at myself as a common sense leftist, and I make that kind of I use that terminology because I'm not with any of the culture war bullshit that's going on and with the Democratic Party. We have a saying when we go over into other countries and observe their elections or go for other missions and whatnot. We say there is no left in America, that this isn't the left. What you come from, where you came from, when you talked about some of the things, what got you involved in politics back in the days, that's the old school left. We were free speech absolutists. We were freedom of the press. We were anti-imperialist. Now everything's turned upside down, but that doesn't mean that all of us on the left are Democrats or radical leftists. So I really wish that some of these people would really change their language. The Kerry Lakes, the Donald Trumps, Steve Bannon, forget about it. You know what I'm saying? His anti-China rhetoric is ridiculous. And at the end of the day, just like Vladimir Putin said, China's not going around putting bases everywhere. You just acknowledged that. Why can't we change our behavior? Why can't we change our language on both the left and the right?
We need to have more conversations. I think that's the start of it. And I would like to see people all over. That's why I like Tucker. Tucker will bring in people like Jimmy Dore or anybody else. And so he doesn't even label himself on the populist right or anything. And this is a good opportunity, though, just to bring it back to Israel. I think that's really the opportunity where now we're showing that there are some people who have the courage to say, I don't have any hate for anybody, but I'm not going to put any country, including Israel, first. And I'm looking at people like yourself who say America before Israel and America over Ukraine. That's the problem I have with the Rashida Tlaibs of the world. They're for Ukraine and then against Israel. You're too inconsistent. But I think we have an opportunity right now. And let me throw out some names for you. Nick Fuentes, what do you guys think? I know a lot of people on the left have kind of started watching him with his takes on Israel, and then also Candace Owens.
I mean, listen, I'll have a conversation with any of those people, and I will say this much, and I'm not patting myself on the shoulder, but I think the populist left, the Jimmy Dores, the Kim Iversons, the Russell Brands have been way more open to listening to people on the populist right than the populist right have been about the populist left. I was pretty much not canceled, but nobody wanted to take my phone calls when I was coming back from Brazil and I observed that election. I didn't have the answers they wanted, and they therefore shut me out when beforehand, when I was all talking about the 2020 election being very, very problematic, they were all having me on stage, letting me speak at the American Project. And I think that the populist left, especially people like Jimmy and Kim, have been way more opening to listen to conservatives and the populist right than the other way around. I really do feel that way.
That is 100% true. I listen to a lot of podcasts, looking at a lot of influencers. There is absolutely no doubt about that. I'm surprised. I don't know why that is. I think this rhetoric, we do have to stop it. I have not been using the terms socialist and communist. I rarely use them anymore.
Yeah.
Because people are using them in a way that others don't mean, and that language is preventing us from getting together. You know, people will call Nancy Pelosi communist, and it's like, well, that doesn't apply to everybody who believes in different philosophies. And this, all throughout all parts of our country. What's the young man's name in New York 15 running independent? Jose Vega, I believe.
Jose Vega. Yeah.
Jose Vega. We would never get a MAGA in New York 15. But I like Jose, and I think he's a real person. So my thought would be support that person. Support them. Marcel Dixon. He and I have had some disagreements, but he's in Clyburn's district. He's a real person. So you got to support real people, and then we could come together instead of these AOCs and Ilhan Omars. They're not there to work with each other. So there's a lot we can do.
Yeah. I think you see a lot of populist right calling people communists that are far from being a communist. And I've gone over to Latin American countries and I've actually talked to real socialists like the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, or if I was in Honduras and talking to people part of a central planning socialist movement. Now, they're socialists to begin with because the United States empire is on their neck and wants to steal their resources and choose their leaders. So they have to come together in a collective manner. That's what real collectivism means, to fight off the empire. But the problem is the populist right will call people like Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden communists when they're not communists. And you'll see less of the people on the populist left like us call people on the populist right fascist. In fact, we call them the populist right. You know, you might hear terms like, and this is my issue with Dr. Cornel West. I'm like, why are you calling them neo-fascist? Fascism is a term that was used to remove the actual meaning of fascism, which is to look at the oligarchs, the merger of corporations and state. Neo-fascism concentrated more on the citizen and stopped looking away from power and looked at the racial element rather than looked at what fascism means. And I say it all the time. Joe Biden is way more of a fascist than Donald Trump will ever be. The donor class, the corporations, especially the big ones, the military-industrial complex, they want Joe Biden over Donald Trump. Big tech wants Joe Biden over Donald Trump. That is a true fascism. So I'm appreciative that you stopped using that term, and I wish a lot of your friends would, because, you know, on the populist right, the things that just drive me crazy is the misuse of the term communist, because they're getting away from what really those people on the left see that works well in communism and socialism. It's more of a labor movement. And the fact that they blame China for everything when China is not going around putting up bases everywhere and is way less violent and way less thrusting of their military compared to the United States empire. So I really do appreciate, Wayne, you not using those terms. It's like, listen, when I started wanting to reach out to a lot of Cuban Americans, especially here in the States, I stopped using the term gusano. Gusano was a term used by Fidel Castro to describe a lot of the people and the politicians that went with the American empire. It means worm, right? So I stopped using it because I wanted to build a bridge. So I'm glad, you know, great minds think alike, Wayne, and that's why we're thinking on the right line. We're building bridges, not, you know, putting barriers between us. And I'm glad you're not using that terminology.
Yeah, just, you know, I was thinking about who out there really brings people together, and I don't know if I can think of somebody on the populist left. The only person I can think of is Tim Pool, and he's a classic liberal. He's not even on the right. So the other thing I'd like to say, though, is race. We've got to be able to, I don't want to change anybody's mind on race, but we got to put that aside. If we were to put the race topic aside, I think it would be much easier for us to come together, even regardless of the communist socialist rhetoric.
Yeah. Well, I think you got to lead with class. You can always acknowledge that there's race issues. I had a lunch with some family members the other day. My sister has a biracial baby, right? He's half black, half white. We're half black, half Italian. You know what I'm saying? You know, we were talking about his parents and with his parents and other people, and we were talking, and we even acknowledged the fact that class is a bigger issue, and it will always be a bigger issue. You can always talk about race issues but you got to lead with class. And that's like, once again, I'd like to have more conversations with people like Dr. Cornel West and ask him what he means about white supremacy. Because remember my old partner, Steve Poikonen for the AM Wake Up, and I love that show.
Oh,
Steve
good.
would say all the time, everybody needs to get their head out of their ass. There's the oligarchs and the rest of us. That is the biggest problem we have. The ruling class and the 99%. They want to divide us up by race. They want to divide us up by religion. So we have to know that going into it. I'm glad you pointed that aside. I don't know if we necessarily have to get rid of it, but if we could put it in the back part, you know what I'm saying? And I know I'll get shit from my old school group saying, oh, yeah, you're just saying that because you're a white man. No, I just know that the ruling class doesn't care about any of us. They think we're useless eaters, and they want to get rid of the most of us anyways.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing. Me and you are having a discussion right now. We could focus the discussion on where we disagree and live in that area and yell at each other. So that's what race is. It's not, I don't even want you to put it away. It's just when we come to the table, let's start with the areas we probably agree, populist right and left, at least in identifying the problem, we probably agree on 80% plus. Maybe on not how to do it, but I said even if you bring in something like reparations or erase to it, I said, why don't we take over DC and then split the profits? Cut the money from the defense spending. Say you cut $1 trillion, and this is just a make-up number, but say you cut $1 trillion. You get 500 for whatever you want to do. The right gets 500 for whatever they want to do. I know it's very simplified, but that's what I would like to see.
Yeah. Listen, it's better than what's going on right now. The ruling class gets it all, and they decide what to do with it. Let's look at this difference over here, because this is something interesting as well as we are moving along. And great discussion. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, man. I'm having a blast. What about Navalny, right? Yes, the MSM, the mainstream media, tries to attack Trump for not being tough on Putin. They're still doing it to today's day. They're ridiculous, MSNBC and CNN. But Trump doesn't point out that Navalny is a CIA puppet. Instead, he compares himself to Navalny while putting blame on Russia. Now, how is that different? And we saw, and we'll play the video right now. We have the video from, I believe it's from, I can't remember what morning show. We'll play it right now. But I mean, it drives me crazy. Breaking news, everybody. Navalny died of a blood clot. He wasn't killed by Russia, and he wasn't a political prisoner. He was doing time for fraud because him and his brother defrauded a French cosmetic company. Okay. So you guys need to get your facts straight. Not to mention he was polling way under like 8% in Russia. So that's a high poll. He's been a racist bastard, calling people from the Caucasus regions cockroaches, and he had a video showing you it could exterminate cockroaches with guns, meaning Muslims. I mean, the guy is not who he is, and I really wish Trump would lean into this stuff rather than going, it's a shame what Putin and Russia did, but he's like me. I'm getting persecuted here too. It's like, dude, come on, listen to this.
Now we have the latest on the race for the White House. Nikki Haley going on the attack against former President Trump, especially over his stance on Russia, with the South Carolina Republican primary just 4 days away. Rachel Scott tracking it all there in Charleston. Good morning, Rachel.
Robin, good morning to you. And for days, Donald Trump faced criticism for failing to address the death of Alexei Navalny. Now he has, but he made no mention of Vladimir Putin. This morning, Donald Trump under fire for comparing his own legal troubles to threats Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny faced while standing up to Putin's authoritarian regime. Trump breaking his silence days after Navalny's death, writing, "The sudden death of Alexei Navalny has made me more and more aware of what is happening in our country, pointing to grossly unfair courtroom decisions." The former president making no mention of Putin.
I don't know why he keeps getting weak in the knees when it comes to Russia.
Trump is facing charges for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election and has warned his political opponents could be prosecuted if he's reelected. There are no free and fair elections in Russia. Navalny pushed for democracy and is among a growing list of Putin's political opponents that have been jailed, poisoned, or killed. Trump's rival Nikki Haley writing, Donald Trump could have condemned Vladimir Putin for being a murderous thug. Trump could have praised Navalny's courage, adding instead, he's denouncing America and comparing our country to Russia. The former South Carolina governor hitting the campaign trail in her home state with just 4 days until the primary.
It's a great day in South Carolina.
And she's still going after Trump for encouraging Putin to attack America's NATO allies if they don't spend enough on defense.
No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want.
The idea that Trump would associate himself with Putin like that over our allies who stood with us after 9/11? What he just did was put all of our allies in danger and every military service person who's serving there in danger.
Haley is still trailing Trump by more than 30 points here in South Carolina. She's expected to give an address later today on the state of the race, but she's made it clear she is not dropping out, Michael.
All right, Rachel, thank you so much for that.
Hi, everyone.
So
George
there's
Stephanopoulos.
that. And, you know, I didn't get the actual video where Donald Trump. Go ahead, Jamie, bring us back in. I didn't get the actual video where Donald Trump was saying, it's kind of like I'm facing the same type of criticisms, but I wanted to be fair in this particular situation because the mainstream media does go after Donald Trump like crazy for not going after, you know, Vladimir Putin, the Russia stuff there too as well. But why didn't Donald Trump take the opportunity to explain exactly who Alexei Navalny is and, you know, point out the fact that this is just once again them getting away from and this is what I'm saying. He seems to be aligned with the oligarchs. He hasn't been mentioning what Tucker Carlson said that interview. And in fact, YouTube's been taking it down. But this is a blown opportunity from Donald Trump. He didn't tell the truth there. And it doesn't take a lot of work to see exactly who Alexei Navalny is. I mean, how is it any different?
Yeah, I think Donald Trump he's a guy that reportedly gets his news from the mainstream. And I think he's just regurgitating what he's been told. And I'm not voting for Donald Trump this election. I'm not against Donald Trump. I'm not against Donald Trump supporters. But there's a recurring theme here where Donald Trump does not go against the what I would call deep state or administrative state. And there's enough evidence, I don't know for sure, but it seemed like Navalny was more of an American asset to go at Putin than anything else. And now he's died now, he seems more useful dead to be able to blame Putin for who? The American deep state. So when you look at means, motive, opportunity, to me, there's more even for our own government. And then I don't want to take it too sideways. We're seeing stuff that there was an alleged Ukraine attempt at Tucker's life. And I'm just looking at it like, to me, it all looks like the CIA, and Trump should be talking about it from that angle. But this is the talking point. They're all going, all the Trump surrogates. Laura Trump was doing this too, that he's persecuted like Navalny.
Yeah, Navalny. And it's ridiculous because Navalny was a CIA cutout. We know this from the WikiLeaks drops. We found out that the government was funding him. And it was a shame to see mainstream media talk about Navalny nonstop. And they're still talking about him nonstop. And they don't even barely mention Julian Assange. That's why I was so proud of OAN for having me on to talk about Julian Assange.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Great. Yeah, it's clips on my is on my Twitter. The OAN brought me on.
Wow.
They brought me on a couple times to talk about Hawaii. And they've also just brought me on to talk about Julian Assange recently. And I was really proud of them for doing so. And I told them big ups because you're not going to see this. Not even on Newsmax was even talking about it. So it's great that, you know,
well, that's a right outlet
talking about this.
That's a right outlet, right? OAN?
It's a hardcore right outlet. In fact, they got taken down off DirecTV and Dish Network because they were talking a lot too much about the vax and too much about elections and having a lot of election stories up there. And they got yanked. Nobody wanted them to talk about elections.
Wow, you know, Steve Bannon hasn't even reached out to you or none of them. Wow, much respect to OAN. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, Steve Bannon won't have me on because of Brazil, because he doesn't want to hear the truth about Brazil. He never did. There was connections between people that work for Steve Bannon and myself, but he didn't want to hear about Brazil because they wanted to tell lies about Brazil because they really wanted Bolsonaro to stay in office because Bolsonaro was the kink in the armor from keeping Brazil and China working together in the BRICS project. And Lula, you know what I'm saying? Like Lula does have his issues when it comes to the vaccine. And a lot of people aren't crazy about him. But, I mean, it's kind of – I think it was Ian Miles Chong just put something up once again, another celebration trying to act like it was a Bolsonaro anti-Lula rally. You got to go to that country to understand. yeah, a lot of people don't like the vaccine over there, and they were really upset the way things happened. And they don't like the culture wars in Brazil, right? But most people in Brazil care about chicken in their refrigerator, eggs in their refrigerator, their living conditioning, whether their children can go to school. And with Bolsonaro, the economics weren't there. They fell off the map. Lula had brought the country out of the economic ruins and, brought it up to a superpower at one point. So a lot of people went with Lula despite not even liking him. The economics were just there. And I observed that election. And unfortunately, Steve Bannon didn't want to have me on because it told a different story. And they used that guy, what's his name? Matt Tierman, the guy who was part of the whole, he was the ousting of James O'Keefe. That guy over there, he was their go-to guy. He was on Tucker. He was on InfoWars. He was on Steve Bannon's show. And he wasn't even in Brazil for the election. But let's talk about this right over here, Wayne, because maybe you can provide a little insight. Let's talk about China. Joe Biden has championed a bill that would escalate a war with Beijing. And now the Don never misses an opportunity to saber rattle with Beijing. Both Joe and Donald will give the military-industrial complex a war in Taiwan in a heartbeat. Take a look at this.
I will revoke China's most favored nation's trade status, and we will impose stiff penalties on China and other trade abusers. They are a tremendous trade abuser. I got along with them very well, but a tremendous abuser. Remember this, no other president did nothing to China. They would walk away with $509 billion a year. It's just a terrible. I took in hundreds of billions of dollars in taxes and tariffs from China. We will once again live by the maxim of the Trump administration, buy American and hire American. I will revoke China.
There it is again. It's like he can say this stuff all the time and people will just buy it. Now, listen, the anti-China rhetoric with the populist right is out of control, Wayne. There are just speculation after speculation. There's not a lot of proof. A lot of the things they say. I mean, somebody told me the other day, a good friend of mine I really well respect, said that China was controlling our energy grid. And I'm like, oh, come on, man. And once again, China has 3 bases outside their own country. We got 1,000. But Donald Trump also, he lost his war, right? He lost his war with China. He tried to change things. I'll tip my hat off for him. It says, the economy, you patriots say, Trump and Biden always brag about their economy. Even though things appear to be a little bit better under Donald Trump, that means the economy, nothing fundamentally changed. The homeless number still increased under Trump, the population every year. And he lost his economic war with China. So that I just got to point that out right now, Wayne. He didn't win his war with China. He keeps saber rattling with China. Why can't anybody see that this can be very, very dangerous? And, you can elaborate more on this whole kind of like, I don't know, this kind of like QAnon attack us from the inside kind of China rhetoric. Please go ahead.
Well, I do have problems with China, so we have a little bit difference here. How would you define, I don't know how you would define who won or lost the China battle. What's happening is China's becoming an economic superpower, and they are overtaking the U.S. Some people might even argue they already have. And I agree with Trump's America First standpoint that we've got to make and build things here. We can't have, I'll pick up anything that I've got here. It's probably made in China and it makes it cheaper. But then in the areas, you have to remember how Trump rose into power. This was a class thing. Even though the class war is dangerous, not as dangerous as the race, but Donald Trump rose into power because Democrats abandoned the working class Democrats. And many of them lived in areas like Cleveland, Ohio, and others that were big in steel and other manufacturing stuff here at home. Where did all that stuff go? All that stuff got outsourced to all different countries, and China being the number one probably culprit of that. And Donald Trump tried to go heads up against them economically. And I like that in general as a philosophy. I am no longer in with the war stuff. But as far as like propaganda, manufacturing, economics, I think we do have to stand up to China.
I agree. And if you want to take them on economically, take them on economically. But the saber rattling with funding Taiwan for a war with
no.
Patriot missiles and all that other stuff is crazy. And every single conservative, not just conservative, but populist right, MAGA Republican in Congress is all for it. They're for saber rattling just as much as they are, arming Taiwan. And that's something that's really, really important here to kind of point out. Also, if you really want to just join with them economically, because when I say he lost, he didn't bring manufacturing back.
No.
Yeah, so if you're going to impose tariffs on China, they're just going to move stuff to Vietnam or move stuff to Mexico. I mean, China moved manufacturing to Mexico to bring stuff into America. So he didn't win, and they can just wait him out. Nothing fundamentally changed. And I don't know how you could do it. I don't know how you could change things. It would be really, really tough, and I do appreciate him taking it on. But there is a big sense of saber rattling where people think that China is controlling a lot of the institutions in the United States. They feel like they're controlling the politicians on the left. They feel like they're controlling academia. They feel like they're trying to take us over by using TikTok. There's all these things that a lot of people believe. Like I told you, somebody told me the other day that they believe that China was controlling our energy grid. I mean, that is bonkers, you know?
It's a lot of fear mongering. You know,
Yeah.
Democrats do fear mongering with their group, and Republicans do it with MAGA too. And I've kind of broken away from that. I am not for any type of funding to Taiwan or anything like that. There is a danger. They do manufacture a lot of these chips that we have in more products than you realize, not just computers. But we have plenty of time. And I don't know. Might be the only thing I might agree with Biden on was the CHIPS Act. There's some dangers there, but in general, I like to see manufacturing here. We have plenty of time to do that. We do not need to support warmongering in Taiwan. And quickly on TikTok, the TikTok problem is the same problem with YouTube, same problem with X, same problem with Meta, all of them. So why are we just focusing on TikTok? I do not agree with the right-wing talking point of TikTok in China. We saw evidence that I believe it was Facebook sold data to China. The problem is bigger than just TikTok. And we saw that the bill that was proposed, I think from Josh Hawley, was terrible.
Yeah, it didn't even mention TikTok or the parent company. It was more of like a Patriot Act for the internet. And it gave them the state more spying power, more control. It was terrible. And unfortunately for those people out there that keep pointing the finger at TikTok and trying to compare with China, the CEO is Singaporean, and the data is kept over here in the islands, right off the Cayman Islands. So a lot of fear mongering for no reason. But you're right, the left does it too. So it's crazy. How about this one though? So Donald Trump always brags about the tax cuts, Wayne. He brags about it all the time. We got money we gave out for all these corporations. They have less taxes. Now they're going to build more businesses. Well, they didn't do that. What they did was they bought buybacks of their own company. They invested in themselves and enriched themselves. Didn't do anything to the 99 cents. U.S. companies' tax windfall fuels record share buybacks. And this was in 2018. U.S. corporations spent a record amount buying back their own shares last year using 2017's tax cut windfall to reward shareholders rather than to invest or expand their businesses. And this is from 2018, this article here. And this is exactly the opposite of what Donald Trump sits there and touts. Companies in the S&P 500 spent $806 billion on stock buybacks in 2018, blowing away the previous record of nearly $590 billion set in 2007. The information technology and financial service sectors were the biggest spenders, with Apple leading the pack. When share prices plunged into the fourth quarter, it only encouraged companies to spend more, setting a fourth consecutive quarterly record for buybacks. So there you have it. Let's bring back in Wayne real quick. Donald Trump, he bragged about it, Wayne. These tax cuts are tax cuts. You cut the tax for the rich. That's what every single president has done. And you know what? That record in 2018 was broken last year, by the way, from Joe Biden. So it's like every single president. How do we get any change from Donald Trump and Joe Biden. They just enriched the corporations. This is fascism. This is the merger of corporations and states. They're buying back their own stocks with the tax cuts they get from the government. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's problematic. But for the tax, you got to break it down into three different categories. Basically, you've got your citizens, like personal people, and the tax cuts. The tax cuts were successful to me in that aspect. And I am more libertarian leaning. I don't like taxes at all. I don't want any money to the government. But so looking at the personal side of it, I did take some notes here. If you made about 15,000 to 50,000, your average tax cut was 16% under those Trump tax cuts. 50,000 to 100,000, 15%, 100,000 to 500,000, 11%. And those were good. On the corporate side, that's a whole different animal. I am actually for tax cuts to the corporations. The problem that we have is we have monopolies. And so because there's monopolies, they don't need to reinvest that money, all of it or much of it, into their infrastructure and R&D and all of that, because there's only so many social media companies. There's only so many in any industry in our country. There's only like 4 or 5 people at the top, companies. So we have to break those monopolies up. And I think the left and I would agree on that. If we break those monopolies up, I don't know how that would be done. If we were able to do that, then if you did tax cuts to the businesses, it would be used in competition, not reinvestment. I am not for the stock buyback. That is a scam.
Yeah, it is. And the thing about it is that, yes, for those average people, it did help them with the percentage of their taxes, but the average salary went down. And that whole move was supposed to create more jobs. More money was supposed to trickle down to the little guys. It did not. It did the opposite. And that's the problem. You can never trust corporations. That's the problem nowadays. They're the ones who are allowing all this illegal immigration to come in, or undocumented workers, whatever you want to call it. They're benefiting off the cheap labor. They're lobbying the government to allow these people to come here. And it's the same corporations that are extracting the resources in those other countries while pushing other murder death squads and bad governments to force the people to come here in the first place. It's the corporations that are the evil ones. The Larry Finks, the George Soroses, the BlackRocks, the Vanguards. They own all the money. They own all the property. They own everything. They're the ones we need to take care of. How about this one? Let's go to the last one here. We'll talk about it too. This one right here, Wayne. Everybody tries to tout Donald Trump as a peace candidate, right? Record 7,423 bombs were dropped in Afghanistan in 2019. U.S. forces in Afghanistan dropped a record number of bombs last year, more than any other time in the last 10 years, according to the U.S. Air Force. So these numbers are good. They're not just from Al Jazeera. The U.S. has dropped 7,423 bombs on targets in Afghanistan in 2019, marking a rise from the 7,362 munitions dropped in 2018. U.S. Forces Central Command said in a report released on Monday, the figure represents a dramatic increase in bombings in Afghanistan in contrast to 2009, when 4,147 bombs were dropped under former President Barack Obama. And you hear Donald Trump say it all the time. You know, all these bombs, we can bring Wayne back up, all these bombs over here, every single one, Wayne, it's $1 million here, it's $1 million there. Well, man, for 2 years straight, you almost doubled the number of bombs that were dropped in Afghanistan, and you failed to get the troops out. I don't want to hear anything that we didn't do it with dignity and pride. We did it sloppy. He had 4 years as the commander-in-chief to get those troops out, and he failed. Plus, he increased the budget in the military-industrial complex, made a ton of money dropping bombs on mountains in Afghanistan, trying to get rid of the Taliban. Oh, yeah, by the way, guess who's back in charge? The Taliban. Go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, we do have to give Trump credit. I mean, the withdrawing
here.
Well, what about for withdrawing from Afghanistan? He was
didn't
the
withdraw
Doha.
from Afghanistan.
Well,
Joe Biden did. He did it sloppily. But Trump had 4 years. And like I said, when Ron Paul had it on the floor, Rand Paul, not Ron, when Rand Paul had it on the floor to defund the war, Donald Trump didn't get hit the wind behind Rand's back and get that vote going. He didn't do anything. He didn't whip up votes. He didn't use his pulpit. He didn't do anything. And that war went on. And at the very end, when it was too late, when he'd already been removed from office, he then tried with Douglas McGregor, but it was way too late.
But they reached the agreement under Trump. And I think that's the only reason Joe Biden even did it when he came in. It was sloppy. That's not has nothing to do with Trump. But let me say again, the deep state. Well, I define the deep state as people we really don't know. If you know their names, their administrative state, deep state and administrative state, they were all in lockstep against Donald Trump. And he wanted to do more. And remember, he was under impeachment and under fire of many different other areas too. I think they were against him. And I have a problem. The problem I have is why doesn't Donald Trump talk about that? He doesn't talk about that enough. I don't see that he's learned that. With the pandemic, that's all that was the administrative state using all their might against him, forcing him into the corner. Same thing happened in Afghanistan. I think he's clearly better militarily than Joe Biden's got us all over the place. I mean, Joe Biden's about to start World War III. Now, if you might not like peace through strength, but it was better than what we got now. But I would like to see Donald Trump articulate what happened. I've never heard him really do that. He's made fun of Milley a couple times, but that's not substantive.
He waxed Soleimani, right?
Mm-hmm.
Israel's first. I don't think anything would be any different in Israel. We'll get to that next.
No. Mm-hmm.
He labeled Cuba a state sponsor of terror before he left. He tried to whack Maduro. Nothing changed in Latin America. The bombs were dropped crazy in Afghanistan. He failed to get us out. I don't like this whole peace through strength kind of BS. I think it's a crock, and it just keeps bloating up the military and gives you an excuse. We have to rebuild our military. Yeah, give them money. I don't see the difference there. Let's listen to what he says when it says peace through strength. We do have a video real quick, Wayne. Let's listen to that. Let's give us a little bit more on how you think peace through strength actually works. I think it's more of the same. Go ahead.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office shortly after we, not me, we win the presidency, I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled. I will get it settled. People dying by the thousands. Horrible thing. Under the Trump administration, we will return to peace through strength. That's what we had. They respected us all over the world. Before I even arrive.
All right, so there it is, Wayne. Listen, you have to explain this to me. This is not peace through strength. It's the same thing. I think that's just a play on words. There's no such thing as we've been doing peace through strength, and we're still the same type of military. When does compromise come into play? If Trump he's the commander in chief, why don't he say we're pulling all the troops out of Syria tomorrow, pulling all the troops out of Afghanistan? We're not wasting a time. I'm going to bring that money. I'm going to bring those troops. I'm going to put them on the wall. Right? I'll put him on the border wall, whatever. Just get him out of there. He didn't do it. And in fact, he talked about stealing Assad's oil and taking Syria's oil as if it was ours to take. How does peace through strength really? It's an oxymoron, if you ask me. Go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, I think it's better than what Biden is doing, but I agree with you. Ultimately, if you're not decreasing the amount of money we're spending on defense, then what are you really doing for me? I will say, it was a pretty good moment to see him cross that demilitarized zone in North Korea, and that was the ultimate example of peace through strength. It got crazy for a little bit. It was called Twitter at the time, and I forgot he was saying crazy stuff like, we got bigger bombs than you. It was wild, but he did not start any new wars and was able to do that with no guards or anything. It was crazy. I think there was some positive there. I think if you take it to that point and then now you say decrease government spending, like for example, I wouldn't mind America having their own Iron Dome like Israel, as long as you decrease the military spending by twice as much as the Iron Dome costs. I'm not for increasing the budget for you to add the Iron Dome, but Trump he's not there. He supported the new FBI headquarters. He's just all over the place, and it's because the people don't hold him accountable. Trump is our best opportunity in my lifetime for the people to hold somebody accountable, and we cannot drop the ball here.
Well, I'm going to disagree to say that was peace through strength. When he met with Kim Jong-un, is because he was willing to go over there and shake his hands. That's compromise. That was, let's put down the missiles and let's shake some hands and talk about some stuff. But guess what? It failed because his military-industrial complex continued to do war games with South Korea where they mimic an invasion of the North. which then enraged Northern Koreans, and everything went right back to normal. It was just lip service. It was really didn't amount to anything. Whether or not you want to blame Donald Trump for not being strong enough on his military, for saying you're going to stop these exercises, I don't know. That's for you to decide. But at the end of the day, I don't think it worked, Wayne. Let's talk about the last issue before we get you out of here. I got some guests coming on in 15 minutes, so I want to make sure we have a little time for them. This is the last one. Let's talk about it, Wayne. The slaughter in Gaza still continues. Jamie, thank you. And we all know that nothing would be different whether it was Trump or Biden at the helm. Beautiful, beautiful Israel, Don says. Beautiful Israel. In fact, you can make an argument that Joe Biden has been slightly better than reversing one of Trump's administration's worst policy positions, the Pompeo Doctrine. And here it is. U.S. reverses the Pompeo Doctrine, says the West Bank settlements are illegal. Pompeo, when he was part of Donald Trump's administration, said that any type of annexation, any type of colonization and kicking people out of their houses in the West Bank by Israelis of Palestinian citizens is not against international law. That was just reversed. So some people can sit here and argue, Wayne, that Donald Trump is actually worse than Joe Biden on Israel. I mean, this is madness. I don't care what you want to call it. And let's bring Wayne back in. You want to call it a genocide. You want to call it ethnic cleansing. You want to call it collateral damage. I don't care. This is ridiculous. And it's American bombs that are being dropped and causing this slaughter of innocent civilians. And you got people like Kid Rock repeating the same stuff you get from Donald Trump. Donald Trump the other day in South Carolina echoed October 7th again. Israel has the right to defend itself. This is madness. Only Dr. Cornel West, and it really is a shame that he has a lot of other baggage with other issues, but he's the only candidate right now that I think Jill Stein, who's running for the Green Party, other than those two, really any serious candidate or known candidate that's even talking about a ceasefire. This is mad. How is Donald Trump any different than Joe Biden, Wayne?
Oh, he's not. And I am heated about this. The MAGA movement is a cultural movement about God, family, and country. There is nothing about God that supports the killing of innocent civilians indiscriminately for any reason. And I shouldn't be waking up in the morning looking at pictures of Gaza and people unlived on my phone, and MAGA says nothing. That is not God. I don't know what gods you have faith in, but that's not with me. Family, I would never tell my son, well, what happened in October 7th, it's okay, like Kid Rock. I couldn't believe the Kid Rock clip. I couldn't believe it. He literally said, we just got to kill 30,000 innocent people, just casually. And there's nothing about country that supports us giving military aid, money, support, propaganda support to Israel to do this. And I think it's a reckoning. It really is going to divide, at least for me. I'm still going to rock the MAGA stuff. I talked to somebody, a good friend of my show, his name's Stephen Ignoramus, and he said, you got problems with MAGA? And I was like, man, I got to drop this MAGA stuff. They going crazy. They're warmongers. And he was like, well, why don't you make MAGA what you want it to be, right? So that's what it's going to be. I'm still going to rep MAGA, and I'm not going to really, tell anybody what to do, what not to do, but I'm going to keep speaking.
Listen, you can speak the way you want to speak there, Wayne. Make America great, not owned by anybody. It depends on what your point of view is of making America great. And I would agree with you a lot more than I agree with Donald Trump. Thank you so much for coming on today, man. I know it's been a long show, but you rocked it. It's awesome. Please tell everybody where they can find you and how they can follow you, help you out, give you a buck or two.
Oh, thanks. One of the first people I started watching when I started streaming, this was in 2020, was Nico House and the Convo Couch. So to be on with you, man, is crazy. Visit my website, middlemaga.com, and I appreciate good discussion. Thank you so much.
Man, thanks for coming on, Wayne. We'll be in touch, buddy. You have a great one.